Good morning once again. Our lesson today, our scripture is Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 and 23. It says, "Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." Have you ever had a day that started out well, but then something happened that turned it bad? That it just changed the whole outlook of the day. But when you think about it, the real question isn't what happened, why did the day turn bad, but what really changed? Did the day change or just your attitude toward the day? Did it affect the way you was looking at today or thinking about the day? You know, we don't like to have what we call bad days. We like good days. But you know, sometimes we need those bad days. Up in Washington State, in the Cascade Forests, there are trees up there that are strong and beautiful and big, and they're hundreds of years old because of the daily saturating of rain that they get. You know, so in our life, a little bit of rain has to fall. That's what's going to make us stronger. That's what's going to make us who we are. That's how we're going to learn to overcome. But friends, we only do that if we accept the grace that God gives us daily. And we have to accept it on a daily basis. I think sometimes as people, when everything is going well, not that we forget God, but maybe we forget to thank God. Maybe we don't concentrate on Him near enough. And I think we see that it's not just something we do in the 21st century. They done it in Old Testament times as well. And that's why God would allow them to suffer to get their attention. You know, we have to accept the daily washings of God every day. Not once a year, not once a month, not even once a week. We are in need of a solid soaking every day. Remember our text. God's mercies are new every day. First of all, we need to learn to accept God's mercy. And we might think that's not hard to do. But sometimes I think it is harder than what we think it is. We have to remember in the crucifixion of Jesus, He was crucified along with two thieves. In Luke chapter 23 and verse 33, it says, "When they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified Him along with the criminals, one on His right and one on His left." Now, the story of the crucifixion isn't new to any of us. We understand that Jesus would put through mock trials, that Jesus was condemned, and then Jesus goes and bears His cross up to Golgotha, and there He is crucified between the two thieves. Luke says one of the criminals insulted Jesus, just like the crowd was doing. But the other criminal rebuked his fellow criminal. He kept telling him, "Don't you understand? This man is innocent. He's done nothing to deserve this. We're guilty. We deserve this. But you're heaping insults when you deserve what you're getting, and this man doesn't." And so he rebuked his fellow criminal. But one of the things I love about this, one of the things that really catches my mind, that as Jesus is hanging on the cross, He doesn't retaliate. He doesn't think mean thoughts. He doesn't condemn those who are doing this. I mean, how long do you think it has been since the people in this crowd, the criminals hanging on either side of Jesus, has seen a reaction like this? I mean, friends, even when someone is afraid and they are cowering in a corner, you can see the fear or the anger in their face. They didn't see any of that in Jesus. They saw nothing. He had no thoughts of retaliating. But it had quite an effect on those around him. If you remember, one of the guards finally said, "This certainly was the Son of God." But the criminals, the thieves, the thief who witnessed the same God showed his grace and mercy many times before. I mean, think about this. On the cross, Jesus is hanging, and the one thief finally says, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." And how's Jesus respond? "This day you'll be with me in paradise." And so the thief witnessed God's grace and God's mercy. And God has shown it so many times before in history. Even back in the very beginning. Remember, Adam and Eve were hiding from God. They had made the mistake. They had done wrong. They ate from the tree they were told not to eat from. And when they heard the sound of God walking in the garden, what did they do? They hid. Why? Because they were ashamed. They knew right from wrong, and they knew that they had done wrong. But what did God do? God called them out from the bushes. God coaxed them out. God gave them the opportunity to admit their mistake. And then He showed them grace and mercy. Yeah, He pronounced a little curse here and there. He made life a little bit tougher. But friends, there's always consequences for sin. But God showed them grace and mercy. In Genesis chapter 3 and verse 21, it said, "The Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and Eve," or Adam and his wife, "and He clothed them." Because think about it. When Adam and Eve hid in the bushes, why? When God asked Adam, "Why were you hiding?" He didn't say, "Because I knew I'd done wrong and didn't want to face you." He said, "Because I was naked and ashamed." So God took care of that nakedness and that shamefulness. He gave Adam grace and mercy, and gave Eve grace and mercy. But see, that's not the only time. It happened throughout history with God's chosen people. God called Moses, a murderous Moses, if you will, out of the desert to come and lead His people out of captivity. God opened His heart to David. And again, you could say a murderous David. After his lust for Bathsheba and the murder of her husband. David, to me, just inspires me. Because here we see a man who God describes as a man after my own heart. But yet we know from the stories David was far from perfect. Even God said, "Don't count your fighting people, David. Don't take a census of the people." David says, "I'm going to take a census of the people." And God sends a curse. But immediately David says, I'm at fault. See, that's why he's a man after God's own heart. He wasn't perfect, but when he recognized the fact that he was the reason, that he was wrong, he immediately turned to God and accepted the grace and mercy that God would give him. You see, accepting the grace and mercy of God doesn't make us never sin again, but it makes us realize who it is that gives us the salvation. Who it is that can pull us out of the muck and mire we've put ourselves into. And we accept that mercy and that grace daily. You know, and God didn't even give up on Elijah after Elijah had pretty much given up on God. I mean, think about it. Elijah had the great victory over the prophets of Baal. And then when Jezebel threatened him, instead of just crying out to God, saying, God, give me the strength that I need, he ran in fear of his life. And he cried out to God, I'm the only one left. Nobody's worshiping you, God, but me. And God assured him he was wrong. He assured him there's others that have not bowed down to Baal. Friends, Jesus will give you mercy today. It doesn't matter what you're going through. It doesn't matter where you've been. Jesus will give you mercy. I mean, people in the world will often try to nail you to the cross of your past. I mean, there are people who are Christians today, very faithful Christians who've accepted Jesus, who've been immersed for the remission of sins, that had some really checkered past. And that's how people often remember. And when you might run in from some of these people of your past, they might say, but you did this, you did that, you were a terrible, wicked, evil person. How can you be a Christian now? Because God gives mercy every day. Through the grace of God. Just like Paul said, I am what I am by the grace of God. Nothing I did on my own. But God has came and He's washed me clean because I asked Him to. I've accepted His mercy. We have to admit we're wrong. And He is right. It doesn't matter if you think you're right, you're not. We have to admit we are wrong and God is right. We need grace. And we get that grace through Jesus. By just turning to Him. I mean, we can't undo the things we've done. We can't change history. We can't change the person we've been in the past. We can't change the events that happened that may have led us down the wrong road, or even if we've led others down the wrong road. We can't change that. But we can be washed clean from it by taking it to God and accepting the grace that He gives us through His Son, Jesus Christ. And He can change who we are as a person. We need to remember blind Bartimaeus. Remember him? Sitting along the road, and he hears Jesus is coming. And he's heard about this Jesus. He's heard that Jesus can work miracles. He's made the blind see. In Luke chapter 18 and verse 38, it says, He called out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Those around him kept telling him to be quiet. He don't have time for you. You're just a blind beggar. He's Jesus. He works miracles. He don't have time for you. And friends, it always just In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, Jesus is the miracle worker. Who needs a miracle more than a blind beggar? Yes. He needed Jesus, and Bartimaeus cried out to him, have mercy on me. And that's what we need to do with God every day. God, have mercy on me. Jesus, have mercy on me. Shower me with your grace. Secondly, we need to have gratitude for every day. And yeah, sometimes that's hard. Especially in the things we've been going through in this past year, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better in the next few weeks. It's hard to have gratitude for every day. Have you ever wondered what the difference between a dog and a cat's diary might be? I mean, I imagine that a dog's would just be bubbling over with joy. Best day ever. It was my favorite. It was great. Every day you'd just go through it and you'd see, best day ever. Because that's the personality of a dog. Now, a cat, on the other hand, would probably start with, I'm still being held captive and treated as a second-class citizen. Even though I am the king of this castle, they think they're in control. But it's just the difference in a cat and a dog and the attitude that they have. I mean, think about it. These two animals in the same house, the same set of circumstances, yet one would be content while the other seems sour. Two entirely different attitudes. See, it's the same way with people. What makes a good or a bad day? Our attitude. Now, yeah, I know there are things that happen that we may not want to happen. There are things that will rob us of our happiness, but we can't ever let them rob us of our joy. But we can still have gratitude for the day. Think about it. How might our own diary start out? Well, we need to start it out by remembering Psalm 118 and verse 24. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. But God, I lost my job today. Rejoice. But God, my loved one passed on. Rejoice. This is the day that the Lord has made. It's a gift to you. Yes, bad things are going to happen because we live in a physical world. But friends, we're not citizens of this world. We're citizens of heaven. And every day we're on this earth, it's a gift from God, but it's also every day we're one step closer to home. Have gratitude for the day. Gratitude is the appropriate reaction to grace. I mean, when you think about, Paul said in his letter to the Romans, paraphrasing, there's nothing on earth you're going to go through that's equal to what you're going to get in heaven. Nothing. I mean, you think about it. We do have rough days. We do have rough times. And you think about how it makes you feel. Jesus understands grace because he gave it. He understands gratitude because he also gave that. But at one point we read in the Bible how Jesus is making his way toward Jerusalem. When he enters a particular village, 10 lepers come up to him asking him for mercy. I mean, they too, like Bartimaeus, they had heard of Jesus. They heard of the great and wonderful things that he has done. They knew he could make them whole again. I mean, these are men that are outcast to society. The general population wants nothing to do with them. And Jesus can make them acceptable again. And so they go up to Jesus and they ask him for pity. Have pity on us. And Jesus does. He has compassion on them. In Luke 17:14, it says, when he saw them, he said, go show yourselves to the priest. And as they went, they were cleansed. Imagine. You go up to Jesus. You've got this terrible, terrible disease that's flesh-eating. Maybe your limbs are even falling off. And you go to Jesus and you say, have mercy on me. And he looks at you and you can just see the love in his eyes. And he says, go and show yourselves to the priests. Because that was part of the Jewish law. Once you were clean, you had to go be approved by the priest. And so as they're going along to the priest, they begin to realize, we're not lepers anymore. We've been cleansed. And Jesus didn't do anything great. He didn't wave his arms. He didn't say any magical words. He didn't even lay his hands on them. He just said, go and show yourselves to the priest. And as they went along, they were cleansed. I think it comes back to what Jesus told the woman who had the bleeding for 12 years. Your faith has made you whole. They were willing to do what he said to do. I mean, imagine witnessing that miracle. Imagine seeing that power. I mean, imagine if you were one of the lepers. How they must have felt. And friends, as a Christian, you should know how they feel. Because sin made us all spiritual lepers. But the grace of God has made us clean. The grace of God has cleansed us. Just like Paul said in Ephesians 2, chapter 2, verse 8. You are saved by grace through faith. Friends, I don't know how God washes away my sins. All I know is he tells me to repent and be baptized, and when I do that, I am made clean. You are made clean. I don't have to know how it works. I just have to know that it does. One leper out of the 10 returns with gratitude. Now, I don't know that the other 9 weren't thankful. We don't know what their attitude really was. But one was so full of gratitude, he returned to Jesus. Luke 17:15. One of them, when he saw he had been healed, he came back praising God in a loud voice. You know, he didn't come back and say, thank you, Jesus. He came back and said, praise God! I'm healed! I'm clean! He was excited. He was full of joy. He was full of gratitude for what God has done. And friends, since God gives us that mercy and that grace every day, we should be full of gratitude every day. Every day. You know, and of course, one of the things that we often overlook But Jesus points it out in verse 16. The one who returned, he was a Samaritan. A Samaritan. He was of the race of people, or of the group of people, because I like it when people say, don't say race, there's only one race, human. But he was a Samaritan, half Gentile and half Jew. So the Gentiles didn't accept him because of his Jewish blood. The Jews wouldn't accept him because of his Gentile blood. And so he knew what it was to be an outcast. And he was still going to be a Samaritan. He was still going to be a social outcast amongst his own people, well, amongst the Gentiles and the Jews. But he came back praising God because he was no longer a leper. He was no longer a leper. And that was worthy of praise. You see, gratitude allows us to focus on our blessings rather than what we lack. Think about that. Many of you may know the name Lee Strobel. He was a reporter for the Chicago Tribune and also a lawyer. Sometime within their marriage, his wife converted to Christianity. She had been an agnostic, and she converted to Christianity. Well, Lee took it upon himself as an investigative reporter to show his wife how ridiculous this was. That why Jesus could not be who people claimed he was. Well, one of the things that affected his life, he was talking about how he had written a story about a lady and her two young daughters that had lived on, I believe, the west side of Chicago, and they lived in a roach-infested tenement. Well, then it burnt. And so Red Cross had found them housing, but it was a very small one-bedroom apartment that they were all cramped into. And so Lee said, I went to their house to interview them. And he said, I was shocked. I walked in. There was basically no furniture. He said there was one table with two chairs. Nothing on the walls. He said the mother had the clothes that were on her back. Each little girl had one short-sleeved dress and one sweater between them. And they told him when they'd walk to school, the older one would wear it halfway, and then the younger one would wear it the rest of the way, and they'd do the same thing coming home. Now, friends, I don't know about you, but if you've ever been in Chicago in the winter, one little gray sweater ain't going to keep you very warm. I mean, think about it. It's been in the low 70s here, and frankly, I've been cold in the house. But he said, he talked to the woman. And she talked about the gratitude she had to God. And the faith that she had for God. And he said, I walked away thinking, how? How can you have faith in a God that's allowing you to suffer like this? But she didn't look at it as suffering. He said, so it was a few weeks later, and things were really slow. It was just before Christmas, and he said, I thought I would go back and check on them and see how they were doing. And he said, when I got there, I couldn't believe my eyes. I opened the door, said there were gifts everywhere, clothes everywhere, food everywhere, and even cash. Said people had responded to the story he wrote about this family, and they just flooded this woman. And he was talking to her, and she kept busy, and finally he said something like, could you just sit down and talk to me so I we can explain it? She said, I'll talk while I'm working. I don't have time to sit down. I said, why not? Well, because my neighbors are still in need. I can't have so much and them be in need. Says, God has blessed me. And I need to bless them. Friends, that's gratitude. That's how gratitude works. Seek forgiveness and give forgiveness. It's very important. Many people are hoarders. They've made television shows about it. You may even know a few. I had a great aunt that you couldn't even hardly walk through her back porch. Magazines and books and cats and whatever else. But the problem with hoarding is, first, it's a whole lot more than we need. But we often do the same thing with God's blessings, especially forgiveness. Friends, one of the hardest things to give is forgiveness. Because that means somebody's hurt me. Somebody's done something to me. And it's hard for me to forgive them. And so we hang on to that forgiveness. We hang on to the mercy God has given us. We hang on to the grace. And that makes us miserable. You see, grace, mercy, and forgiveness, God gave them to us because He loves us, and they're given to us for us to give away. And another thing we like to hoard: pain, anger, resentment, insults. We try to justify it. We try to keep the victim mentality, but we can't. Why can't we? Because nothing we've been through compares to what Jesus went through. Nothing that I go through in my life compares to what Jesus endured in His life and on the cross, and as an innocent man, as perfect, as one without sin. The only reason Jesus suffered and died is because of sin in the world, of which I have partaken, which you have partaken. So we can't hold on to that victim mentality and justify it. We can't hold on to the anger of things that happened long ago. I mean, I know people that are angry about things that happened long before they were born. I mean, we laugh about that. We see it in a lot of the sitcoms about these family feuds, and people can't even remember what it was about. Friends, that's real. There are people in the world today that are still hanging on to that anger and resentment to this family because they done something to my family, but I can't tell you what it is. I don't know what it's all about. But something happened. And insults, we like to hang on to those as well. I mean, think about it. One thing you learn when you're a public official or whenever you're in front of people, whenever you have a high-profile job, people are going to insult you. Because you can't please everybody. You can't please everybody. You know, I often wondered how my father did it. He was a horse show judge and a football official. And I heard him say one time, I don't like confrontation. And I said, Dad, you put yourself in that position all the time. But he was very good at both. And he didn't worry about what people said. It would be nice to learn that. Because people, you're not going to please everybody. I mean, and the easiest example was look at our politics in our country. You know, people that think either side is crazy. Because you can't please everybody. Then the insults start flying. And people will hang on to those. People will. And we've said it before, 10 people can tell you how wonderful you look, you're going to hang on to that 11th person that tells you, you look terrible. That's the one you're going to hang on to. Jesus reminds the 12 that they need to give what they've been given. Matthew chapter 10 and verse 8, he says, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons, freely give, or freely you have received, freely give. You've received grace, you've received mercy, you've received forgiveness. Pass it on. Pass it on. Look at Peter for a moment. And we all know this story about Peter, Matthew 18, verses 21 and 22. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times? Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Wow, 490 times, or whatever it is you get to, depending what version you're reading. I know that so-and-so has offended me that many times, so I'm done forgiving them. That's not what Jesus is saying. So Jesus clears up his answer with the parable of the unforgiving servant. You know, here is a servant that owes the king 10,000 talents. Let's understand what this is for a minute. 1 talent equaled 6,000 denarii. So a denarius equaled 1 day's wage. So 1 talent would equal 6,000 days worth of work. So 10,000 talents would equal 60 million days, or 240,000 years of labor. A person in today's world that's making $100 a day would owe $6 billion. And the servant is saying, have mercy on me, I'll pay you back. Really? You're going to live another 240,000 years to pay me back? Have mercy on me. And so the king says, I'll tell you what, forget it. The debt's canceled. The debt's canceled. It's gone. You can't ever pay it back. It's gone. You're free. That's grace in action, people. It's grace in action. But then, the unthinkable happens. The forgiven refuses to forgive. He goes out and finds a fellow servant who owes him just a paltry amount of money and chokes him and says, pay me back. And he says, I can't. And so the first servant has the second one thrown in prison. And the king hears about that. And the king is angry. And he tells him, I had mercy on you. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant? Throw that man in jail. Much forgiveness should produce much forgiveness. But it doesn't always happen that way. People don't truly recognize grace. Always. And those that don't recognize the grace they've received don't respond to people like God responds to people. Friends, grace is a natural outgrowth of recognizing the grace in our own lives. When people have been gracious to us, we'll be gracious to others when we recognize it. But if we have an attitude of entitlement, or I deserve that, we don't recognize the grace that we get. And we won't be giving it as well. Friends, you have to remember that forgiveness is not the approval of the sinful action of someone. Because you forgive someone, you're not saying, I approve of what you're doing. I approve of that action. It means that you're giving it to God. that you're putting it in His hands. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 23 says, when they hurled insults at Him, He did not retaliate. When He suffered, He made no threats. Instead, He entrusted Himself to Him who judges justly. See, when we forgive, that's what we're doing. We're putting both ourselves and the person that we forgive into the hands of God. Because He's the one who's going to judge justly. My family, let me remind you, God can make each day a good day if you allow Him to do it. And accepting the gifts that He offers, responding to others like He responds to people, helps us overcome bad days. God will wash us daily with His cleansing if we just merely ask. We just have to ask. And He'll make us clean. He'll give us the strength we need. And He'll lead us through each day. We hear it quite often, my friends. Let go and let God. And so that's my challenge for you today. Let go and let God. He will grace each day if you just give it to Him. If you're not a Christian, you have the opportunity to be baptized for remission of sins. If you get in contact with us, we'll make arrangements. We'll immerse you and you'll come up a brand new creation. You'll be washed in the blood and you'll be ready to accept the grace of God every day. Christian, if you haven't been accepting that grace every day, that mercy, you've been focused on the bad and the evil around you, go to God. Ask Him to give you the strength and the proper focus. Because if you ask for His mercy, He'll give it to you. Whatever it is you might need prayers for, go to God. And if you need to contact somebody else, if you want the prayers of the church, contact us. We'll pray for you. Whatever it is you might need, you have the opportunity to take it to God so that you can allow God to grace your day.